Today, we're diving into the mind of a man who looked at the chaos of the world around him and basically decided to hit delete and then start all over again from scratch. And trust me, this is way more than just a story about buildings. It's about a radical, almost ruthless philosophy for forcing order onto everything. This is the story of Le Corbusier and his code for building a world of pure geometric perfection. Everything, and I mean everything, starts with this one powerful, frankly audacious idea. Le Corbusier looked at the messy, beautiful, organic chaos of modern life, and all he saw was a problem that needed solving. And his solution? It wasn't to tweak things or adapt. No, it was to tear it all down and rebuild, creating a brand new world defined not by history or emotion, but by the cold, perfect logic of clean lines.
And look, this wasn't just some abstract idea he talked about. It was a full-on declaration of war. A war against tradition, against sentimentality, and really against the very fabric of the cities that people loved and called home. Case in point, his Plan Voisin for Paris. I mean, you have to hear this. His proposal was to demolish a massive chunk of the historic heart of the city, the winding streets, the beautiful old buildings, and replace it with a grid of 18 identical 60-story concrete skyscrapers. This wasn't just architecture, it was a statement. He was literally declaring the past obsolete and arguing that real progress demanded a total brutal reset. And this slide just lays out the central conflict perfectly. On one side, you have the traditionalists. They're working with what people know and expect. You've got curves, ornamentation, references to history. But on the other side, you have Le Corbusier. He just tossed all of that out the window. For him, the one and only authority was uncompromising logic. The only forms that mattered were the purest ones, the square and the circle. This whole philosophy was called radical functionalism, and it was a direct attack on centuries of architectural tradition.
So this brings us right to the heart of it, what we're calling the Corbusier Code. It's so much more than a style. It's a whole belief system. It's this deep conviction that true progress, real progress, only happens when you organize the entire world according to the fundamental truths of geometry. But you have to wonder, where in the world does a worldview that rigid even come from? Well, to understand the man, we've got to go back to the beginning, because his code wasn't cooked up in some Parisian cafe. It was forged in the quiet, intensely precise world of his youth. This contrast right here is the key to everything. On the one hand, you have his environment, a small Swiss town totally dominated by watchmaking, an industry built on absolute geometric accuracy, on crystalline clarity. Everything has a purpose. Every tiny piece fits perfectly. But then you have the individual, a sickly kid named Charles-Édouard Jeanneret, who had poor eyesight and a restless mind. He was an outsider, struggling to find his place in a world that just didn't seem to fit him. So, how did this struggling kid become the prophet of modernism? It was a very deliberate, systematic transformation. He took that precision from his hometown and turned it inward. He started by rejecting the decorative chaos of Art Nouveau that was popular at the time. He found his truth not in nature, but in man-made logic, in mathematical ratios. And this whole journey came to a head in 1920 with one single profound act. He abandoned his birth name. He shed the identity of Charles-Édouard Jeanneret and became Le Corbusier. And this wasn't just a new nickname, it was a total reinvention. He was killing off the identity of that sickly, struggling boy and stepping into a new one, a purified, powerful vision of himself. He was literally becoming the architect of his own identity, built on clean lines and a crystal clear purpose. And out of that personal reinvention came a philosophy that was about to change the entire world. He started to see not just himself, but everything, through this brand new lens of radical, unflinching logic. This quote, this says it all. The plan is the generator. What he meant was that creativity, beauty, all of it, it doesn't come from some spontaneous flash of inspiration or messy human emotion. Nope. It comes from the logic of the plan. The structure, the system, the blueprint, that was the source of all value. Everything else was just noise. And this way of thinking led to his most famous and, frankly, most controversial idea, the machine for living. He argued that a house isn't some piece of art you decorate with history and feelings. It's a machine. It's a highly efficient tool designed purely for its function. Its beauty wasn't in the fancy details, but in its flawless efficiency. A totally radical idea, and one that, as critics would later point out, sometimes forgot about the living, human part of the machine.
So to design one of these machines for living, he developed a strategy, Geometric Purism. You can think of it as a ruthless editing process. You strip away every single non-essential detail. Sentimentality, decoration, history, he saw all of that as a distraction from the fundamental truth of an object's form. The goal was just to keep stripping away until only the pure functional essence remained.
But this wasn't just some high-minded philosophy. Le Corbusier was obsessed with the practical side of things, developing daily systems and habits to turn this grand vision into concrete reality. And this is maybe his most brilliant and obsessive tool, the modular. This was his master system for creating universal harmony. He developed a proportional grid based on two things, the human form and the golden ratio. And then he applied it to absolutely everything. From the height of a doorknob to the layout of an entire city block, every single dimension was governed by the exact same mathematical logic. It was his way of creating a seamless, perfectly ordered, human-scaled world.
So let's just break down how it works, because it's actually pretty wild. First, you start with a human-based measurement. Simple enough. Then, you create a grid of proportions using that famous golden ratio. But step 3 is the key. You apply this grid relentlessly to every single part of the design, big or small. What's the result? Well, every part of the building is in perfect mathematical harmony with every other part, and with the people who actually use it. It was his way of making sure his entire world spoke one universal mathematical language.
His other key habit was less about math and more about vision. The man was a relentless sketcher. But his sketchbooks weren't filled with, pretty landscapes or realistic portraits. They were his personal laboratory for geometric purism.
You can think of it as his daily ritual. He used his sketchbooks for what he called visual decompression, breaking the world down into its most basic shapes: cubes, spheres, cylinders. It was a really sensory process for him, exploring how light and shadow played on these pure forms. While other architects were buried in history books, Le Corbusier was in his sketchbook, rediscovering the elemental truths of geometry, day after day. This was his method for pattern discovery, for finding the fundamental code that was hiding just beneath the surface of reality.
So what was the result of all this? Of this relentless system, this unwavering code? Well, it was nothing less than the complete transformation of architecture and of the man himself.
I mean, the payoff was just staggering. That sickly kid, the outsider from a tiny Swiss town, became the prophet of modernism. His radical ideas, which were once completely rejected, became the dominant aesthetic voice of the 20th century. He didn't just join the conversation, he completely rewrote the rules. His legacy is absolutely everywhere. And it's complicated. He essentially weaponized geometry, turning it into a powerful tool for building on a massive new scale. His entire vision was codified in his famous 5 points of a new architecture. 1, lift the building up on reinforced concrete columns called pilotos. 2, create an open floor plan with no load-bearing walls inside. 3, a free facade, meaning the outside walls are just a skin. 4, long horizontal ribbon windows to let in light. And 5, a roof garden to give back the green space the building took up. These 5 points totally shattered traditional construction. They became the grammar of modern architecture. He convinced the world that beauty wasn't in decoration, but in pure form and perfect function. But this is also where the major critique comes in. His grand ideas for mass housing, these vertical cities, often turned into vast anonymous projects that were seen as sterile and destructive to community. His unwavering belief in universal order sometimes just failed to account for human culture, comfort, and the simple need for a place to feel like home. So when you look at the glass and steel skylines of our cities today, you're seeing his code everywhere, in all of its revolutionary genius, and in its cautionary tale.
So, okay, how does a story about a long-dead architect apply to us? Because the Corbusier Code isn't just about buildings. It is a powerful mindset for anyone who feels like they're drowning in chaos. This, right here, is the ultimate lesson. Le Corbusier's story teaches us that real power doesn't come from just reacting to the world. It comes from your ability to look at the confusion, to see past the noise, and to impose your own clear, logical order on top of it. You are the architect of your own clarity.
So I want to leave you with a question to take with you. Find one area in your life, your work, a personal project, even just your daily schedule, that feels totally chaotic right now. And ask yourself this: how can I apply the Corbusier Code here? How can I strip away everything that's not essential and bring a pure, geometric order to this problem? How can I create a simple, powerful system where right now there's only confusion? Because in the end, that's really what it all boils down to. You don't have to build skyscrapers to use this principle. Just remember that geometry is the code for clarity. The systems you create, the logic you choose to apply, that order is the blueprint for your own version of greatness.